Hi, welcome back. And today I'm delighted to have Rashmi Hayes with me. Rashmi is a nutritionist, and we're going to talk about food, obviously, and we're going to talk about ultra processed food in particular, I hope. So, anyway, hi, Rashmi.
Hi.
Hi there. Yeah, I usually start these things off by asking people a little bit about their upbringing because I find it curious how that might play into the rest of your life, essentially. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about growing up?
Yeah, sure. Well, I grew up mainly in the UK. I was born in South India. My parents brought me over to the UK when I was 2 years old, so I'm effectively British, been through the whole school system and everything.
Hmm.
Um, but we came from a part of South India where not a lot of people were coming over, so we didn't have a big, although culturally we come from a big extended family and so on, we didn't have that in the UK. So my parents actually um, had quite a tough time sort of making a life for themselves here, really. My dad was a GP, so he set up his GP practice from scratch. My mum came here not knowing much English, so she taught herself English and took herself off to adult school to do training so that she could work. So growing up, it was always kind of a feeling like we were in just adjusting. So we had our home traditions and our home cooked Indian food. But then at school, it was all very English and a bit strange for us growing up. So it was a constant adaptation and learning and so on. And I guess through that, it was, it was always for us as a family kind of gave us a curiosity of learning about new cultures and new practices and going to new different places. My parents loved traveling, so our first foreign holiday, as we'd call it, because India never counted as a foreign holiday,
Sure.
was was to Benidorm in Spain. And that was just a package holiday, and just from that, just a love of traveling and a love of learning, and food that involved, tasting different foods. My mum is a strict vegetarian, so we had a lot of vegetarian cooking growing up. But my dad, my brother, and me were happy to experiment. So as we grew up, we tried different foods. And yeah, I guess from there, my mum was an excellent cook. And I was very lucky growing up with delicious South Indian food, really.
You just remind me when you were saying that about school dinners. And what a horror! I don't know about your school, but my school there was pretty unidentifiable stuff on our plates
Yes.
sometimes, quite frankly. We used to get this stuff called gypsy tart. Did you ever have gypsy tart?
Yes. Yeah, that was definitely a Kent thing because I grew up in Kent, and
Right. Right.
yeah, we used to get that sometimes at school desserts. I loved that. What about you? Did you like it? It was very sweet.
Well, I think I liked anything sweet back then, truthfully. But what was it? I mean, absolute mystery. What it was made of, quite frankly.
I think a lot of sugar, basically.
Well, yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, school dinners, those big scoops of mashed potato. Yeah, God, blimey,
Yeah,
that's
I remember the mashed potato being made of that powdered smash mash. That's what
right.
we were given. It's just,
Mm,
I know, crazy to think now that that was the quality of school dinners, but
yeah, yeah. The other thing I always remember is whenever anyone dropped a plate, everyone would cheer when the plate
yeah.
smashed. One of the things that take you back, and that. So, I suppose if you moved here when you were two, you were just basically English, I guess, weren't you? If you'd been sort of 5 or 6, you might have had a bit more of a kind of um, a dual identity. Is that fair to say?
Um, I probably, well, I think even that those two and a bit years I had in India have made a difference because I can compare with my brother's experience because he was born in this country and he is definitely more anglicized than me. So it
Yeah.
is funny, I think, even at that young age, because I grew up hearing my mother tongue even at that age. So I kind of was able to get to grips with, I'm not anywhere near fluent in it, but I know more than my brother. So it's one of those funny things, I think, and I feel I still feel a connection to India having been born there. I think sometimes these things go a bit deeper. You can't really explain them.
No, sure. And I guess you're also very influenced by your parents as you grow up, and they've spent
Yes.
God knows how long there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a similar scenario, but with a different part of England, I guess. So whereabouts in Kent were you?
I grew up in the Medway towns,
Oh, right.
the
Yeah.
Chadstone area, and I went to school in Rochester.
Oh, I like Rochester. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen some gigs at Rochester Castle.
Oh, yeah.
They started having gigs there. It was about 20 years ago, something like that. So you sort of referenced your mum being an excellent cook. Is food a sort of therefore a bigger part of your life than it would be mine growing up? Because my parents just treated food as, stuff that got you through, I guess, rather than anything to be pleasurable, I think. Hopefully my mum will never hear me say that. But yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I would say so actually, because now, many, many years later, having taken an interest in nutritional therapy, I look back on all of that time. And when I talk to my clients, I ask them, an integral part of getting to know a client and knowing how to help them is knowing about what they ate growing up in their childhood. And that can tell you a lot. And I think when I compare to my experience, definitely my mum cooked us all like a traditional South Indian dinner is a two-course meal. You have your chapatis, which are the flatbreads, two or three different vegetable dishes, and there will always have been powdered chutneys and other chutneys and pickles as kind of condiments, and they'll all be homemade, or even if they were shop bought, they were made, authentically with proper ingredients. Otherwise, my mum wouldn't buy them. And then followed by that, we would have rice and a lentil dish, and then we would finish off with plain yogurt, which my mum would tell us, that's just the way to help your digestion. And we now know that yogurt has all this probiotic bacteria in, which is good for your digestion. But she would pass on with every dish, the reason why it was good for us and the reason why it was healthy, and that there was this set way of eating. And we would be eating seasonally according to not only the when the particular vegetables were in season, but when it was a particular festival in India, and there would be traditional foods eaten for that festival. And they were all picked very carefully to make the most of what was available for that season. And even later on, when I was older and I was pregnant with my two boys, my mum would be giving me the typical kind of food that was given culturally to pregnant women, so that to strengthen their bodies and to and that would be good for the health of the baby. So this was just natural to me, and I think this is it is something that has got lost when we look at Western foods or Western culture. I can put that again, in these speech marks. But in South India, there still is a deep culture related to food, and that's what I try and bring out with my nutritional therapy, the sort of the wisdom of these cultural traditions, because over the time we've sort of dismissed them as just not that important. But now that we know more about the way our bodies work, the microbiome, the digestion, and modern day lifestyle diseases, actually these didn't occur in peoples who ate a traditional diet, and it's probably because of that diet that gave them that resilience.
Yeah, yeah. And something we've also talked about before off camera is, of course, ultra processed food. And on the book Ultra Processed People, that blew my mind when I read it.
Mm.
because I became a vegetarian when I was, I don't know, 17 or something like that, and about the turn of the 80s. And back then, you couldn't get anything, any meat substitutes. There was one thing called proto veg, which was pretty disgusting or tasteless, and so on. So over the years, when stuff came out, it was like Christmas to me, you know.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
you know, I just thought, wow, all this different stuff that it sort of seemed to fill a hole somehow, actually, in my diet. And what I didn't realize is just how far that had gone, um, and just how cynical the food companies are about the edible chemicals that they call food, essentially, and what they can get away with as well. I was talking to some friends from America who said it's even worse over there. The laws are a lot more
Mm.
lax, and you can just put almost anything in food, stuff that you're not allowed to here. So you grew up eating very healthy. Um, is that the kind of whole story, or did you then kind of
No,
leave home and start eating pizzas or whatever?
a bit. Yeah, there's my university time. Everything kind of dropped quite quite heavily. But so I would say that my growing up, my mum's South Indian cooking, you know, saved me, took me through. That was the best bit. But like all families, we were all eating. We all switched from real butter to margarine because we were told that margarine was healthier. We
Mm.
would eat the kind of supermarket sliced white bread. Um, I remember certainly at secondary school, I wasn't really. I can't even remember what I was having at breakfast time. I think I just had 2 slices of white bread with peanut butter or something. Um, Lunchtime, I would, if I would be taking lunch in, and again, it would be cheese sandwiches. So my breakfast and lunches weren't really that great, but I came home to amazing evening meals. And I think, and at that time, it was just what everyone ate. You got the biscuits and the crisps and the chocolates, and that was just everyday food at snack time or whatever. And I never, we never thought that was bad for us. It was just that
Mm.
was just food.
Yeah.
So I'm going into when I left home for university, so then fended for myself. I got a few good cooking lessons from my mum. But generally, I just ate out in the student union. I did at least have like I really valued proper meals, so I wouldn't just go and eat sandwiches. I would eat a proper cooked meal at least. But then going from a kind of a crazy lifestyle at university, and then I trained as a solicitor in London, and that was quite long hours, unpredictable hours, quite high stress. I think then that the not enough nutrition in my diet, nutritious diet, then started to affect me because my lifestyle was just so stressful that my health started to suffer. So I can see that now looking back, but at the time you don't appreciate these things. But it wasn't until my mid-30s really that I started. I had sort of symptoms that you just sort of write off, because so for example I had hay fever, I had skin issues, sort of it would vary from eczema or dermatitis, or there was never really, it was just irritable skin, and then I had sort of what you would call IBS symptoms, just my digestion was a bit all over the place. And it was just, any time I went to see the doctor, it was, oh, this is just, eat more fiber, or this is just as you get older, you get these things, or it's in your family, have some creams or take some paracetamol for any pain that you might be in. And I just sort of coasted along and went along like that, really. And I'm sure, you know, you can identify with that for yourself or
Oh
with
yeah.
friends or family. But these
Yeah.
things build up over time.
Yeah. I was told, and I've no idea if this is still true or even if it was true, but I was told that in 5 years of doctor training, they get taught 6 hours of nutrition, which perhaps may go to explain why it's kind of dismissed in that kind of situation you were talking about. So, did you just kind of assimilate all this into your life then, rather than doing something about it? The
Uh,
little niggles.
yeah, I mean, I think um, I just, when I was working as a solicitor in London, they occasionally in my office building, they would have a book sale. They would have someone come along and sell all these books at a bit of a discount. And I went along to that one time, and I found um, some books about nutrition. There was like things about the juices, you know, fresh juices, the juice diet, and there was a book called "You Are What You Eat." I don't know if you remember. It was this Scottish lady, and she, you know, it was all about eating um, many more fruit and vegetables, and in a kind of more fresh and raw version. Um, and it from then, actually reading that, I've moved on a lot from that thinking, but I think I just realized that actually maybe different food is the answer. You know, this whole key to health is could just be a case of, you know, just getting more nutrients and just in a different way. And just from there, I just started, you know, just trying different nutrition programs or just reading up about it a lot more and just learning from that basically. Um, and, you know, making mistakes along the way. So, um, but I think, as you said, it's not something I felt that there was when I was speaking to doctors or GPs, I felt that there was a missing picture with when it came to food, and that is a growing there's a growing recognition of that. To be fair, now, absolutely, you know, it's much more widely appreciated about the quality of the food. I think it's still a bit not well understood what food or you know, we still talk about calories, for example, and I think that doesn't really help the conversation. But yeah, I think I just, from quite a long time before I helped myself, I was definitely interested in looking at food as one of the key factors in health generally.
Was it a struggle? I mean, the constant temptation of chocolate and ice cream, or whatever. Was there a constant temptation of it, or was it? Were you kind of more convinced than that?
Uh, it was definitely a struggle. I would definitely say that I have a sugar addiction. I think, and it's just a case of how well it's controlled or not. So even and you know, um, most people can maintain a particular type of diet for a few weeks, but the trick is how do you make it sustainable for life? Because you can be strict for a while, but as soon as you stop that diet, you kind of then make up
I
for
did
that.
that. Yeah, I did the 800-calorie diet that Roy, whatever his name is, in Newcastle University invented for diabetes. Um, and I did it for I think 6 weeks, and by week 3, I felt 20 years younger. I had so much more energy. I felt absolutely fantastic, but it wasn't sustainable. And
Mm,
when I fell off the wagon, I really fell off the wagon. Yeah, it was like booze, pizzas, everything I'd been missing. So
yeah.
hadn't really fixed it in my head at the very least. I think the addictions were all still there, to sort of unhealthy stuff, sugar in particular. Yeah. Sugar addiction doesn't get talked about much, does it? I was interested to hear you flag that up.
Yeah, it doesn't, and it's such a tricky thing because it's definitely not seen as anything that serious. But you know, when even for me to appreciate that it was that I had to cut down on sugar, that took me a long time to come to terms with that and to do it, and to take on board the fact that it was important to do that. You know, sometimes when this is one of the challenges in my nutritional therapy role when I'm talking to clients is I have to approach that quite gently, really, because it's an emotional attachment. You know, it's people reward themselves with their favorite sugary foods. We put sugary foods out in celebration, birthdays and anniversaries, and you know, and we socialize around sugary foods, and alcohol and so on. So taking that away, you've got to, you know, that's a big ask. So it's you know, and the way to do it is just to do it step by step. It's not really to focus on the taking away, but instead add into your diet the proper nutritious food, because then your body doesn't crave the sugar so much.
What about supplements? I read Patrick Holford book. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's he sells his own supplements, so he has a clue as to what's coming up. But he's written a book about addiction. It's called How to Quit Without Feeling Shit, and it goes through each addiction and supplements that you can take to offset the cravings and that kind of thing. Is supplements or are supplements something you involve yourself in with nutritional therapy?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they definitely have a role. So, for example, if you are, you know, I can get on board with that idea of if you're going to take something like sugar out of your diet, you can take certain supplements that will help your body sort of with the detoxing process. But and also, you know, some people are deficient in some or there are some vitamins and minerals which are deficient in everyday diet. So even if you switch to a perfect diet, it would take a long time to get back up to normal levels. So you can take a short course of supplements just to kind of give you a boost. But generally speaking, the best thing to do is to eat the foods which have those vitamins and minerals in, because your body just absorbs them better. The problem with supplements is the quality of the supplements matters, because otherwise it's just another processed food that your body doesn't recognize. And the thing as well is taking a high dose of one vitamin can knock out the absorption of other important vitamins. So things need to be in balance too. So it's something, you know, it's just something to approach with a bit of care and thought, really.
Yeah, I saw a poster by Viridian in my local health shop, which you probably know, Lansdowne Health Place down in Lewes. And this Viridian post was basically saying, you know, our supplements are natural, but other people's aren't necessarily. And I didn't really know. I just presumed supplements were good for you, full stop, you know.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, where we're in this world where we get all these confusing messages about what we should be doing about our health and how we should look after each other, and then that these particular brands are good, and you've got all you're hit with all the marketing messages, and also the guilt messages as well, about that you're, you know, it's okay to indulge, or you're worth it, or, you know, all of that. And it's really, and there's this social pressure as well. You know, I have with my two kids, it's really hard to kind of restrict the food that they eat you know, at parties, or you know, their schools regularly have cake sales. So it's, you know, and they're all done for charity. So it's all really
Yeah.
how you control and opt out of all of those things without, you know, people, without feeling a bit of a, you know, a bit strange or a bit weird.
Mm. No, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It must be very difficult because the kids have so many social pressures, don't they? I'm sure we both remember the kind of peer pressures you have as a child, and that's so powerful because you don't want to be left out, do you? You know, you
Yeah.
want to have all the cool trainers or the good lifestyle. Yeah, the fun as well, of course. So tell me about how you stopped being a solicitor and started being a nutritionist.
Well, so that so I worked as a lawyer for a few years in London, and when I met my husband, actually, is when I after we got married, is when I left um, my law job, because actually his job involved traveling overseas, so he was posted overseas. So I was quite happy to stop being a lawyer at that stage, because I had done it for 10 years and felt like 15 years, the number of hours that I'd worked.
Right.
Um, so I was quite happy for a break. And um, soon after that, after having been overseas a couple of years, is when I had my first son. And after having him is when I had my health just kind of started to deteriorate. So then actually that phase from after having finished, stopped doing law, I then went into a kind of a 10-year period um, of being a stay-at-home parent, supporting my husband in his job, but raising two kids, but also doing a lot of that whilst having autoimmune health issues and all of the complications that came with that. It was about, I think when my oldest son was 2, was when I was diagnosed with inflammatory autoimmune arthritis, because I was having incredibly painful joints. Um, it had also started in my chest as well, so I'd been coughing a lot, but that was put under control quite quickly with steroid medication. But then my joints completely flared up, so I had quite a few days when I was just in bed with the pain, really. So it was really quite a low time. And so I had, at that point, it was just a cycle of going to see different doctors and having different tests, and it took a long time to get the diagnosis. And then you have to find the medication that will work for you. They have a medication protocol, so they start you on the lowest dose, well-tried medications first, and see if that works, and then change to something else if it doesn't. And all the while, you just hope for the best and hope that something works, and you deal with the side effects and so on. I got put on steroid medication, even a higher dose, which is the normal protocol for autoimmune conditions, as well as some other conditions, but it made me gain weight massively, which is one of the common side effects. So yeah, I mean, it was a lot to deal with, really.
I bet it was. Yeah, it must have been pretty challenging for your mental health, I would have thought, being put through all that.
Yeah, definitely. It's just the thing, you know, you don't, it's also you kind of feel, well, that's it now, that this is my life, this is how it's going to be. um
Mm.
so and you know, being on all the medication and having the side effects and the underlying condition, you know, and feeling that, well, you know, this is, and feeling that you're not you know, being good at anything in particular, you know, wasn't able to be a proper mum to my son, I wasn't able to be a proper wife to my husband, and you know, you get all of those thoughts as well, just the kind of why me.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. So did you have some kind of moment of epiphany, or was it a gradual thing that?
It was definitely a gradual thing. I think I'd been reading, as I said, I'd been reading lots of books about nutrition generally, just out of my own interest and just trying different things. And I felt I'd been really healthy, you know, following all. And this is the thing, right? Because you can read something and think, oh, okay, yeah, this makes sense to me. This is what I'm going to do. But then I look back on some things that I did and thought maybe it wasn't great to just be on a juice diet for a while, because what about all the proteins and the, you know, healthy fats that were missing from my diet? But I think, I mean, whilst I was under the care of the doctors, I was at the same time trying to ask them about, you know, how did this happen, basically, you know, what are the root causes? But what intrigued me was that they weren't really worried about the root causes. They just looked at the symptoms and then had a protocol of how to treat that with medications. And it just got me thinking at that point that surely it can't just be that. You know, why aren't we looking at what the root causes are? Because that could be an important factor in improving my condition over time. And it was then really that once, well, it was about 3 or 4 years after I'd, you know, been taking medication and so on, and my condition was under control. I was talking about nutrition with a friend of mine, and she recommended me her nutritionist. And I got in contact with this lady, and it was her who introduced me to this sort of functional medicine approach, where you look at the root causes of symptoms and you address nutrient deficiencies specifically, depending on what you as an individual are going through. And a big factor of that at the time was gut health, which at that time it was just a sort of an emerging idea, although it has been well known within functional medicine, which is more of a holistic medicine that looks more at food and nutrient deficiencies rather than medications. That it had been well known in that field for a long time, but was just emerging as a thing in more mainstream medicine. And I just found that I was getting better following her advice. And it was just a marvel, really, that I was sort of expected to be on certain medication for life, but following a nutrition plan that really basically was just about eating real, proper, home-cooked food, but more traditional food, not just green salads or fruit and vegetables, which we're told that are the healthy foods, but, you know, food cooked traditionally, in proper natural oils, in proper natural proteins, proper natural fat content, but having it as a balanced diet, and just finding that my health improved. And it was just a revelation, really, that it could be that straightforward. Straightforward in the sense it was a straightforward idea. It's not easy to do because it involves a lot of change in your life, but it's a simple idea.
What kind of changes does it involve?
So, for example, for me, because my health condition was an autoimmune condition, and I had, you know, in my 20s, a lot of digestive issues. So trying to get my gut into good health was one of the key priorities. And for that, for me particularly, meant eating more meat-based food, because up till that point, I mean, I had grown up I was never 100% vegetarian, but I had been growing up predominantly vegetarian, and I prioritized vegetarian food because that was my culture and that was my background and that's what I knew how to cook.
Mm.
But with it was more about trying to heal my gut lining, and my nutritionist introduced me to the whole idea of traditional based cooking that would involve meat stocks or bone broths, eating meat on the bone rather than just the kind of muscle meat. And I actually found that it helped me. It's not for everybody, but it was something that helped me. And I understood that it was all about rebuilding the gut lining, which needs collagen, actually. And collagen is what you can get from animal foods. So because at that time, because of all the medication I was on, I was becoming quite sensitive to quite a lot of foods having to come off dairy, which wasn't a problem for me before. But after going through this process, I was able to reintroduce dairy, and it was all fine from there.
Is when you treat somebody, I'm guessing that the treatments are very individual.
Yes.
Is that right? There's not a sort of one diet fits all solution.
No. I mean, and that's why I take a detailed history from childhood, because it is important, the different phases in someone's life that leads them to where they are. And it also is important, what particular health issues they might have are important as well, and their outlook on life. They might identify as being from a particular culture, or they might have they might have food sensitivities, or want to keep quite strict beliefs around the types of food that they want to eat, and all of that is absolutely fair enough. So it is absolutely tailored to the individual.
Mm, mm.
And also that's important because what we have lost with our modern lifestyles is the sort of ability to know what's good for us as an individual, to know the effect that the food we eat has on our bodies, and therefore to know sort of more intuitively what food you need to eat, or what food your body is craving for, because these cravings come originally from your body saying, well, you needing more salt, or needing more protein, or needing more water, and we've lost the ability to listen to those signals and know what we need to eat. We just sort of eat more mindlessly, or just according to our cravings.
Yeah. And the marketing we're bombarded with as well, of course.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, the whole psychology of how supermarkets are set out, I think, is quite interesting in that respect. That they put the vegetables as the first thing that you encounter because that makes you feel good about yourself, and then
Yeah.
you can go off and make up for it by buying loads of rubbish at all the other aisles. But so one thing I'm thinking about here, if people are listening to this, is it all sounds, or it all could sound a little bit austere, you know. I'm just wondering if there's any way we can kind of focus more on the positive, good sort of feelings and so on, because it sounds, I don't know if it's nothing you've said, but I think the whole kind of concept of diets and so on is something people very much associate with restriction, and with, not being allowed to do this and this, and then conversely that, having a bit of cake becomes a treat, and
Mm.
that's how we're brought up to think about things, like you say, when there's social occasions and celebrations, it's cake, isn't it? Birthday cake, Christmas cake, etc.
Yeah.
So how do you kind of get around that and convince people this is actually good, it's fun, you'll feel better and not worse, etc.?
Well, the thing that I try and say is that it's all about eating real food. And real food means that you don't need to worry about calories. You don't worry about fat or salt or whatever else that we're told that we need, or or you don't need to worry about your weight or anything like that. It's all about cooking food from scratch from real ingredients. So a food has a natural fat content if it contains fat when you produce it, like full fat dairy. We actually process the milk to take the fat out to make semi-skim dairy. So I would say, recommend to clients that you go with the full fat dairy. You make sure that you have real butter rather than margarine, which is a processed product. It's okay to have, full fat cream. And you cook with natural oils, olive oil, coconut oil, sesame seed oil, according to traditional recipes. And when you eat food that's made with those real ingredients, it tastes amazing and makes you feel really good. And you can have, it's like when you sit down with friends and you have a very well home cooked meal that's cooked with, with care and love by people that it might be your family, someone in your family that's cooked it for you, or your friends, and you sit round, have some good conversations, some good quality wine. That is the joy of it. And if you eat like that, I promise you, you will feel well in yourself. It's eating these foods which are processed and which have been artificially created. It's those foods that contribute to most of the health problems that we have today. Because when you look at communities around the world who maintain more of their traditional diet, and it doesn't matter exactly what you eat, because all around the world across the centuries, different people grew and cooked different food according to where they lived, according to their climate, according to their culture, and they developed their diets over centuries according to what they experimented with, what they saw kept them well, what they saw made sure that children grew up big and strong. And this was all trial and error and experience passed down through generations. So if you can cook meals according to traditional recipes, then not only do they taste amazing, they fill you up, they keep you satisfied, they help you feel well, and then you stop craving the sugary foods and the foods that are bad for you, not least because when you have them, they don't taste nice.
Yeah. You mentioned good wine. I suspect anybody who's watching this because of me will probably be thinking, where does booze fit into all this? With a sort of trepidation, I'm sure. So where does booze fit into all this?
Well, so there is I'm certainly not going to tell anybody, don't drink anything. I think, again, it's a case of trying to keep it in moderation and choosing the highest quality that you can and just having less of it. So I would much rather, because again, with things like, if we look at wine, you might go to the supermarket and see your bottle of wine with a nice looking label, but has that really been made in a vineyard according to traditional winemaking practices, or has it been made in a factory and had colouring added to it and all sorts of other things added to it by a supermarket that's trying to make a lot of money and cash in on this and just make you seem like you've got a decent bottle of wine? So I would definitely be, we should treat ourselves to the best quality that we can afford, get a decent bottle of wine, or, even we spent some time in Austria because of my husband's job. They have beer there that they make from mountain spring water, So I would definitely say, you know, get the highest quality, just drink it in moderation and enjoy it with food and with good friends.
Mm, mm. Couple more things occurred to me there. This is going off the subject a little bit. Sorry, I do this occasionally. You talk about restaurants and so on. Is the food in Indian restaurants in the UK what you grew up with in India?
No. So it's I don't know if, I mean, you will get some of the dishes you see on the menus eating out in India, but they're not really the what people eat every day everywhere in India. I mean, India is a vast country, and everywhere you go, they will have their own way of cooking food. Um, so it's even from village to village or town to town, never mind from one state to another. They
Mm,
all have their different ways of cooking. So there's no kind of one style of eating. But where I'm from in India, there's a high proportion of vegetarian food, and it's where the idea of being vegetarian came from and was developed over centuries. And it is the most amazing tasting food. Just the different spices and flavors and the different um, selection of dishes and things, all just in one meal.
mm.
And the seasonality as well, it constantly changes. So people eat a huge variety of different vegetables there. Even if you're not a vegetarian, in India, people generally eat quite a huge variety of vegetables because so much more is grown there that you don't get here.
Do you miss out on things like vitamin B12, which is something I've always supplemented. Well, since I became aware that you had to eat it, I suppose. Anyway, but
Yeah.
do you? What happens in India in that situation? Are people missing out on stuff like that, or do they take supplements? Or
Um, so I'm sure some people do take supplements, but I think um, if you can aim to have a you know, a traditional diet, or even so for example, vegetarians in South India where I'm from, they still have dairy as quite a big part of their diet. Some people don't eat eggs, but some people do. But those, like, if you have dairy or eggs from animals that are reared properly, you know, eating a diet that's traditional for them, not an industrialized diet,
mm,
then the dairy products and the eggs that you get from them will be much more nutritious as well, because that's why those items were included in the diet, to provide those missing vitamins and minerals. Otherwise, I think you would have got a diet where those foods weren't needed. But in my part of South India, where there's a huge number of strict vegetarians, they definitely include dairy and butter and ghee and eggs in their daily diet. And I think it still um, can be an issue, I think, if you're, just because that can be more of a by individual thing, whether someone's absorbing enough from the diet, you might need to supplement. But that's why those foods are in the diet. It's just a case of making sure that the animals you get them from were reared um, according to their own traditional diets too.
yeah, yeah. I never knew anything about absorption at all until somebody said to me that I think it was the omega 3s. Because I'm diabetic, I have more trouble absorbing them than somebody who's not diabetic, and
Oh, right.
um, so that made things quite complicated until people start bringing out vegetarian, vegan, omega 3 oil and stuff like this. Because yeah, I mean, I don't even know if this is true, but I read that people have always got it from fish, but that's the only reason they get it from fish is because the fish consume the algae that contains it, and
Yeah.
that's the actual source of it. Um,
Yeah, so you can actually you can include the algae in your diet, the seaweed. Um,
yeah.
yeah, or
Is it expensive to do all this?
it can be. I think it depends. Like I think it takes more planning, advanced planning and preparation to if you're working with a tighter budget. But you can definitely. But the biggest problem really is time and convenience.
Mm,
So if you have the money, then yeah, it's much easier for you to kind of make sure that you're eating a healthier diet. You don't have to worry about how much things cost. But if money is tight, it can be done. It just takes a bit more planning and preparation. And which again, in our modern lifestyles, we're very time poor. And the reason why we reach to all those convenience foods is because they're convenient. They're just ready to eat or ready to cook and so on. Yeah, so
yeah, since I started learning
one
about
of the
ultra
things.
processed foods, I'm always kind of looking in other people's trolleys in Tesco's, thinking, "Oh my God, look at all that stuff," and it really is no wonder that people become obese. I mean, I know there's other reasons people can become obese, etc., but some people have really got bad diets, and it is a time thing, isn't it? With a lot of people, if they can just buy a £1 pizza and shove it in the oven, all of a sudden
Mm,
they've got more time to look after the kids or do whatever they do. Watch Jeremy Kyle or whatever. Well, not now, but yeah, it's kind of, you can see that the way that the whole of sort of Western society is kind of pummeling people from both ways. It's denying them the time in the first place, and then when they
mm,
haven't got the time, it's providing this appalling solution of edible chemicals which harm their health. And
yeah.
something's really wrong, isn't it? Do you see this changing, or are we up against a very powerful and perhaps ultimately victorious force in the terms of the big food companies?
Oh, well, I think that's difficult. Um, I think unfortunately it might come back to, if you have the resources to make sure that you can switch to a more home cooked diet, then you'll be fine. But it is the problem is that it's the people who can't manage their time differently or don't have the money that will suffer because it there's no other way for them or no other choice for them except to buy those quick convenience foods or to feed or to they can't have the arguments with their kids about what's healthy or what's what they should or shouldn't eat.
Mm,
I'm hopeful that in the long run, because there is a growing awareness and there is more push on because this is all about all these issues are intertwined. It's all connected with the climate crisis as well, because that's going to impact the quality of the food that we can grow and the amount that we can grow. So I think there'll be a few things running in parallel, because there will be some companies or some need to make food in a factory that humans can survive on, maybe not at peak health, but at least we can survive because we can't grow everything we need because of the climate issues. And then there'll be another, stream of people who are trying to take agriculture backwards a little to the time when things were grown with the fewest amount of pesticides. They were grown with biodiversity in mind, not this huge fields of monoculture crops and mass insecticides and so on that we know affect our biodiversity. So I think we're going to have these competing things for quite a while. and
Yeah,
out of necessity.
yeah, yeah. There's a lot of people forging a better world in this respect, with nutrition, with permaculture, these kind of fields, I think, which is good.
Yeah.
Um,
But I think we're understanding a lot more as well about how our health and the health of the nature around us are so linked, because, you know, we've had this long period of time where we thought, well, we can, everything that we need to survive and eat, we can make ourselves. You know, we can make food in a factory and that's good enough. But I think we're realizing that actually we're codependent with all the nature and animals and birds and so on around us, and insects, and our survival depends on their survival too.
yeah, yeah, and you would hope that the information can spread like wildfire, and that could be one of the positive aspects of the
Yeah,
internet, I guess.
yeah.
So what I'm curious about is what you actually do when you get a client. So you look into their history, as you were explaining, and what happens after that?
So I get them to fill out a few forms that will give me a bit of their history about what their objectives are, what their health history might be, what they ate growing up, and they also do a food diary. So we track everything they eat and drink over 2 to 3 days. And then I have a meeting with them just to talk through all of that and just to figure out where they are in life and what their potential challenges are, what their ability is to make changes, and what kind of changes are they open to. Because I think it's really important to, in this whole idea of tailoring it to an individual, to that it has to be a collaborative process, because I'm not just going to write them a diet regime and say, here you go off and follow that, because that's not how I see my role as being effective. I kind of talk through what it is they want to achieve. And a part of that is this education around, you know, what is a healthy food, because we're told that so much of this, you know, that fat is unequivocally unhealthy, for example. And I try and go through, well, that's not quite as simple as that. So there's an education element too. And then there's a question of just taking it step by step and making sure that to meet the objectives that they want, whether it's to feel healthier in their own skin or to kind of overcome any health symptoms they might be having, that the changes that they make are achievable. So we'll come up with a plan to change 2 or 3 things. It might be adding a particular, you know, it might be that they might be skipping breakfast, for example. So one thing would be to add breakfasts in at least 3 times a week. And then we'll talk about how they do that, because it might be a timing issue in the morning. So how can they prepare the night before, for example, or how can they, you know, make their own granola on a Sunday, and or boil their eggs on a Sunday and spread them out during the week, something like that. Or there might be particular supplements they could add for a short period of time. So we just go through small but achievable objectives, really, and then keep track of that and keep that moving and progressing over time.
Some people find it harder than others, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The biggest challenge is finding someone's motivation for change, because it's very easy to stay how you are. I say it's easy, but it's not really. You know, people live through some very difficult circumstances and aren't happy. So, but it feels harder to change than to stay the way you are. So whilst change is harder, at least you're moving towards an improvement. But sometimes it's too difficult for people to kind of contemplate that, really. Like, for example, the challenge of switching to something more healthy feels harder than putting up with the situation that they're in, that is already quite hard, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Well, in a funny kind of way, it doesn't make sense at all, does it? But it is what happens. Yeah, that's the power of the subconscious, I would think.
Yeah, and I think that's the challenge as a coach, really. That's kind of why people come to me, because they want help with that bit, and and that's why I think it's just about the collaborative approach of thinking, okay, well, what are the potential obstacles you might face, and how can we plan to get around them, now, basically, so that we try and optimize the chances for success in the long run.
Yeah.
But it's also the other thing actually is trying to get an early win, because it's amazing just the small changes that you can make and people feel immeasurably better. And having that motivation, when you know that something you changed that was quite easy to change actually had a bigger than expected success, and that gives them the drive to keep going.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I can imagine that. And also, of course, you're delivering accountability, aren't you? Which I
Yeah,
think it's much easier to make changes or even just make difficult decisions if you know you've got to talk to someone next week and say whether you've done it or not. It's a bit like
yeah,
school, but better than school. I hope. Well, it's better than my school
yeah.
and better dinners. So yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about there?
um I don't know. I mean, I think generally, um, I think it's quite liberating, really. I know it's a tough idea to get around, the fact that the changes you need to make to get into the position where you're kind of eating as much home cooked food, or natural ingredient food as possible. That seems like a huge hurdle, but I think the message that I'd like to get across to anyone who's listening is that to take it step by step, because once you're there, and I say this from personal experience and from seeing, clients and my nutritional therapy colleagues as well, once they, with their successes, it's so liberating to be free of those cravings. It's so liberating to be free of those health symptoms that were dragging you down. It's so liberating to feel more control of your life. And we're not promising magic or miracles or whatever. We all know that life can happen, but you can get a bit more control back. And it might seem difficult, but the ideas are simple, that don't make the journey easy, but getting through it step by step, you won't regret it.
Yeah, yeah. It's about feeling better, isn't it? Like your website says. Do you want to tell people how to get in touch with you? Should they want to book up an appointment?
Yeah, sure. So they can visit my website, which is www.hayes, which is HAYES, hayespantry.co.uk. And on the contact me page there's different ways of getting in touch with me: WhatsApp, email, or contact form. So look forward to hearing from you.
Brilliant. And I've very much enjoyed hearing from you. So I'd like to thank you for your time, Rashmi. And perhaps we should point out your name is pronounced Rashmi and not Rashmi as well.
Yep.
When people get in touch. And yeah, so
Yep.
thanks ever so much for your time. And I really, really hope that people listening to this will have kind of gleaned stuff that will indeed make them feel better, because that's a good thing.
Yeah. No, my pleasure, Gerard. Thank you very much. It's been great.